What the H-E-double-L was that? No, I'm not actually talking about the Oscars. We will get to that in just a second. But what the heck was Biden thinking, saying what he did, and then having the White House backtrack it all in terms of the regime change that does need to happen, mind you, in Russia? Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Trish Regan Show. I am Trish. It's good to have you here. Just a quick reminder that portions of today's program are brought to you by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals, clearly with everything going on in the world right now, than now. So we're going to have Charles Thorngren, the CEO of the company, coming up a little bit later in the show as we talk about all the inflation that's out there. But back to this, again, what the H-E-double-L was it? I mean, Vladimir Putin now actually has something to stand on, right? Now he can actually point to the U.S. and say, well, look, they're trying to get rid of me. They do want regime change. Joe Biden went over to Poland. He made a big speech. I actually thought, myself, it was a pretty good speech. I actually thought he said what needed to be said. I mean, I've been saying all along, this guy can't continue in power. Russia will not be able to resume its position on the world stage as any kind of economic player, given what has just happened. Okay, you don't forgive and forget things like Ukraine. And so, truly, I do believe the president, and I don't agree with him on much, was right in what he said. The problem is, you can't always say it. You can't. You got to be disciplined. You're the president of the United States of America. And by the way, you're working with NATO. And NATO has their own issues that they've got to confront surrounding Putin. They don't want to escalate the situation. So if Biden, who's getting up there in years, can't quite keep a lid on what he's saying, it actually puts other players over there in Europe in a whole lot worse position, which is why you saw Macron come out then again in his speech over the weekend and say, we shouldn't be pushing for regime change. The White House did within, minutes. I think I tweeted at the time, wow, I actually agree with the president on something. And then I spoke too soon, clearly, because within like 20 minutes, the White House was like, no, that's not what he meant. He didn't mean regime change. Well, let's be honest with each other. How can he not mean regime change? You cannot have thousands of people, civilians, children being killed like people have been killed in Ukraine and not expect that there is going to be a massive punishment. We cannot do business with Russia. Europe cannot accept natural gas from Russia going forward. It is so critical, by the way, and I've said this from the beginning, that we start to rely on ourselves for our own energy needs in light of what we've just seen. Clearly, you can't trust countries like Russia. You think back, 20 years ago, back when the world was kind of a different place, more than 20 years ago. And Putin actually seemed like he might have a decent shot of bringing Russia into the world stage as a major player, as an economic force. And yet he squandered that. He squandered that because he's got all these pipe dreams about, pretending he's like some kind of colonial power. He wants to be Alexander the Great out there conquering everything instead of focusing inwardly on his own economy. Think about how the people have lost out in Russia. The per capita income, just $10,000 a year for each Russian person, while you have all the corruption and all the oligarchs taking all they can for themselves, including Vladimir Putin, who is apparently one of the wealthiest guys in the world. I don't know how you do that on a salary of like $160K. How do you afford a $14,000 coat that you go and give your rally, which, by the way, was total copycat move, trying to copycat President Trump when he went out there and gave that rally. I guess everybody had to smile too for the cameras, or else, look, he is a thug and he can't stay in power. That's just the reality of it. Joe Biden, however, dared to speak reality, and in this very precarious environment with all the Europeans, Joe should have been more disciplined. He really should have been more disciplined. It was what the left always criticized Donald Trump for, by the way. They didn't feel like he was disciplined enough, although I would argue that there was a method to the madness here. I'm not sure what the method to the madness was on this one. Why would you communicate the guy can't stay in power when you don't want to be looking as though you're communicating a regime change? Somebody's got to sit him down and figure this out ahead of time. It makes you really wonder who the heck is running things. Antony Blinken had to come out and say, no, that's not what we meant. not what we meant. Macron saying, oh, nobody's advocating for regime change. And it's all happening as we watch Russia theoretically say it only wants the Donbass region. I don't buy that. I don't think you should buy that. I think this is Putin looking for more time. He took Crimea. He wants all of Ukraine. And by the way, my sources say he doesn't want to stop at Ukraine. He wants to go much further. So we need to be strong. We need to back NATO. We need to actually have a position on this. And maybe you can't communicate it publicly. Somebody ought to decide these things before they get up there on stage. But here's the truth. Vladimir Putin cannot stay in power if Russia is going to have any kind of economic future. You know who knows this? Interestingly, you know who knows this is actually the head of the Federal Reserve for Russia. She came out last week, and I've heard very good things actually about her, that she's sensible, she understands economics. She came out and said, this is going to be disastrous for the Russian economy and for the Russian currency. Well, she's absolutely positively right. So what happened? It looked like she was going to resign. Well, you can't just resign in Russia. Vladimir Putin said he was appointing her to another term. So good luck with that. Look, their economy is ruined. I would argue for a generation now, because I don't know how they get it back. There will be sanctions, and sanctions are going to get so much worse. We've barely scratched the surface in terms of sanctions. So you can expect much, much, much more in the coming days. It was a gaffe of epic proportions. We know this is a president who is prone to gaffes. I would just say this. Why can't we have a president that has some discipline enough that we're not going to escalate tensions on the world stage? Or if he wants to escalate it, do it intentionally, knowing what you're doing. Just don't shoot off your mouth in such an undisciplined way. Speaking of shooting off one's mouth and a lack of discipline, I don't know if you watched the Oscars last night. It's funny, I actually hate these shows, like passionately despise them. I don't like what Hollywood stands for. I don't like the pomp and circumstance around these shows. I find them, frankly, really, really boring. In fact, no sooner had I tweeted out that the Oscars is about as boring as it gets, and it keeps getting more boring every year, then what did we see? Oh, a bit of a move there on the stage. You saw Will Smith going up and smacking Chris Rock after Chris Rock said some things about his wife's illness, which causes her to lose her hair. And, everybody's kind of wondering, was it staged? Was it real? I'll tell you this. They just single-handedly overnight probably gave the Oscars the biggest ratings boost they've ever seen, because again, nobody really watches it. Nobody really knows it's on. And then all of a sudden you go to Twitter and social media lights up with the video of Will Smith smacking Chris Rock. It was really bizarre. And then he shouted a bunch of obscenities from his seat. A lot of people wonder whether it was staged, whether it wasn't. I'm not even, who cares? The point is, it shouldn't have happened. None of it should have happened. I mean, this is what it's come to. When some of the leading members of our Hollywood society are insulting each other, swearing, and then smacking each other around on national television, what the heck is going on? That's not okay, all right? It's just not okay in any way, shape, or form. Look, I get a guy trying to defend his wife. I do think that some of this was already they'd been having rehearsals. Apparently there was one account that they had had a rehearsal the day before and he seemed fine with it. So what changed? If you look at the video, he's actually laughing as Chris Rock is delivering these jokes, and then all of a sudden something just snaps. So he snapped on live television and pulled a violent stunt. I mean, I don't think that this is a good look, shall we say, for our country. Biden can't keep it together, and Will Smith certainly can't keep it together. What a mess. Meanwhile, I've been going on and on and on for, a year and a half now about inflation. I'm starting to feel like kind of a broken record, but nonetheless, I've been telling you, you got to be prepared. You've got to be diversified. You've got to be looking at things like precious metals specifically. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, gold, because it's one of those ways that you really help even out the challenges that you're going to be seeing increasingly in your portfolio, because the value of the dollar it's being eroded every single day. And now you throw in the threat of World War III, and we've really got problems. You wonder why everybody's flocking to gold. I figured it would be a great time to bring our good friend Charles Thorngren from Legacy Precious Metals back on the program to help explain all of this. Charles, welcome back. Good to see you.
Oh, great. Thank you. Glad to be back.
Well, you and I have been together on this, predicting higher and higher inflation. And we saw, of course, last month that wholesale prices were moving up. We know consumer prices are moving up. And then, of course, all this happened with Russia. What does this mean for investors? What does it mean for everyday consumers? And what does it mean for gold?
Great questions. Unfortunately, the answers are not as fantastic for the everyday customer or the economy. Inflation, it's the dollar killer, right? It's the purchasing power killer. It means everything that we do is going to cost more. It's just bottom line. And for those of us who save, it's the worst thing for us. If you save money, you're in a situation where you're losing value on your purchasing power every day. And it's a horrible thing. We've talked about inflation for quite a while now. And I think, the scary thing about it is it's actually worse than we were actually talking about. I think you'll see that number jump into the double digits real soon. A quarter basis point here, a half basis point there by the Fed. It's not enough, and it's going to be delayed, but they really don't have a choice, unfortunately. If they were to come out and say, we're going a full point, the equities market would be destroyed. And they can't have that either.
No,
right?
they're terrified of that. That's clear. But, I'm looking at the Fed, and you and I have both criticized them for their failure to act earlier. But now I'm like, guys, they still don't get the message, because they're planning these rate hikes. But you're right, Charles, it's not enough. Larry Summers, former head of the Treasury under Bill Clinton, former head of the National Economic Council under Barack Obama, not exactly, in other words, a conservative, he's out there pounding them and saying, listen, there's no way that they can avoid inflation at this point. It's there, it's coming, because what are they going to do, Charles? Suddenly say, okay, we're going to raise by a whole point, a point and a half. You and I know that's not going to happen.
No. The only one who would have possibly done anything like that is long in the history books. That would have been President Reagan. He would have been the only one who had that kind of courage. But you're not going to see that now. And realistically, it's good that we don't. The economy is not strong enough for it. It really isn't.
Yeah.
You have a scenario where we have the massive inflation. We have a Fed who is indecisive. It feels, in my mind, it feels political in nature. You can't, in this year of election, you can't go and remove half of everyone's value in their equities market and expect them to be okay with the powers that be. Yeah. It's bad either way. It depends on your philosophy. Rip the Band-Aid off or take it off slowly. I'm a rip the Band-Aid off kind of guy, so we can get back to where we need to be. We know it's coming. Let's deal with it. But the biggest thing besides those points is the fact that they have decided not to get rid of the assets on their balance sheet. That's your bigger problem.
Yeah, and this is something that I think is going to stay with us for some time. Look, even best case scenario, Charles, if they're getting 2 to 3% interest or increase in inflation a year, they're like psyched. And now we're looking at, 6, 7, 8, possibly way higher percent of an increase in inflation. Even at 2 to 3%, it's eroding the value of your dollar. My parents love to say, back in, 1972 when we bought our house and it cost us, $5,000 for the land and $25,000 to put up the house. That same house now is worth a lot of money.
Yes.
A family getting in, right, wouldn't be able to afford that, a young family today, because of inflation.
Absolutely. Inflation, and also with that, when you're fighting the inflation, you're raising your interest rates. Suddenly now that house payment's going to balloon in price, and you'll see some shocks in the real estate market because of that too. People don't buy homes today for the value of the house. They buy homes based on how much it costs them a month.
Well,
so you're going to see that change too.
Well, that's worrisome as well. And, a lot of people, they're trying to figure out, how do I hedge this? How do I plan accordingly. And, you know, I've always been a big believer in having anywhere from 1 to 5% of your portfolio in gold. You guys have a very specific approach, and I just want to mention that they can give you a ring. I've told everybody, call my friend Charles. He'll help you out. One viewer actually, she said that she's like, I finally bit the bullet, Trish. I called Legacy Precious Metals, and she had a wonderful conversation there with Jonathan, who helped her, you know, kind of understand this, what can be somewhat complicated a landscape, but you guys help make it easy for people. You distill it down into what you can get a gold-backed IRA. You can actually buy gold as well, right? Through you.
Correct. Correct.
No,
You can have it in the IRA, delivered to you, stored for you, you know, any form and fashion we have here. And when you call my guys, they're going to probably explain it better than I do. I'm a numbers guy. My guys take what I say and turn it into English for us all. So.
Well, and you have the guide too. I tell people to go to legacypminvestments.com, legacypminvestments.com, because there's a really good explainer there on how to invest in gold. And look, I just think it's kind of the cost of doing business. To me, I look at it and say, you know, I'm never going to sell my gold. My gold is there. It's the one thing that I can depend on when everything goes to, you know, HELL. Look at what was happening just recently in the stock market, right? And you look at the turmoil we're seeing because of Russia, Ukraine, and then gold is upwards of $2,000 an ounce. It's like you can kind of sleep well at night knowing that you've got some preparation in case things get really bad. That's kind of how I think about it, Charles. You?
Absolutely. This is the insurance for your portfolio. It's the insurance for your retirement.
Insurance for your portfolio. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it really is what it is. If everything goes wrong, that's there to balance it out, to keep you safe, keep you protected. And that's the best way to look at it.
Yeah, well, we like being protected. So Charles Thorngren, thank you so much for joining us today. I just want to remind all the viewers, you can get more from Charles. You can speak with him directly or one of his team members at 1-866-589-0560, 1-866-589-0560. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. So go to legacypminvestments.com today. And just a quick reminder, I'd love to have you subscribe to this podcast on Apple, iTunes, on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. I'd also like to remind you to go to my website, trishintel.com, sign up for my newsletter there, and make sure you come find me on Locals. Lots of interesting content that you're not going to get on all the other platforms. On Locals, you can help support the show there at trishregan.locals.com. Again, trishregan.locals.com, and I'll see you tomorrow.